Hi, this is Barbara Milton. What I'm going to do today is to begin a project of reading the federal writer's slave narratives. I would like to eventually record all of them. So today I'm starting with Volume 1, Alabama. These are narratives from Alabama. So let's go with, as you can see when you open up this collection called Born in Slavery from the Federal Writers Project. These were interviews done by federal agents during the 1930s in the Roosevelt administration as a way to capture the lived experience of people who were born in bondage before the Civil War ended. These were African Americans who were enslaved and were freed from slavery and were living in 13 states in the South. And a bunch of agents went out and interviewed them with a standardized interview instrument and recorded their stories. And I would like to share those with you here starting today. So we're going to start with the very first narrative, which is, let's open that up, Charlie Aarons from Oak Grove, Alabama. Let me just make this a little bigger so I can read it. Oh, very good. So, this was done in August 6, 1937 by Mary A. Poole. And the ex-slave's name is Charlie Aarons. Says he loved young Master John. Some friends driving to Oak Grove, Alabama, gave the writer the opportunity on August 4th to interview an old ex-slave, Charlie Aarons, who was quite venerable in appearance, and who, when asked his age, replied, "Madam, I don't know, but I sure been round here a long time." And when asked how old he was at the time of the surrender, which is the Civil War ending, he answered, "I was a man able to do a man's work, so I expect I was 18 or 20 years old." Uncle Charlie, as he is known among his own color, and the white people who knows him, told the writer he was born at Petersburg, Virginia, and his parents, Aaron and Louise, were owned by a Mr. J.H. White, who had a store in the city but no plantation. His parents had 3 children, 2 boys and 1 girl, and when Uncle Charlie was about 10 years of age, he was sold by Mr. White to a speculator named Jones, who bought him to Mobile. He recalled being placed on the block at the slave mart on Royal and State Streets, and the anxiety of hearing the different people bidding for him, and being finally sold to a Mr. Jason Harris, who lived near Newton Station in Jasper County, Mississippi. Uncle Charlie never saw or heard of his parents or brother and sister again, and never knew what became of them. Uncle Charlie said Mr. Harris was a pretty rough master, and somewhat close. All rations were weighed out and limited. He had a white overseer and a Negro driver, who was the meanest of all. Mr. Jason Harris had about 60 slaves and a large plantation of 100 acres. The men and women worked in the fields from 6 to 6, except on Saturday, when they had half a day holiday to clean up generally. The home of the Harris family was a large 2-story house, and the quarters were the regular log cabins with clay chimneys. They cooked in their cabins, but during the busy season in the fields, their dinners were sent out to them. each slave having his own tin pail marked with his name. Water would be sent out in a barrel mounted on an ox cart. The old men and women looked after the children of the slaves while their parents worked in the fields. When the writer asked Uncle Charlie if his master or mistress ever taught him to read or write, he smiled and said, "No, ma'am, only to work." When asked if they had any special festivities at Christmas or other holidays, he replied, "No, we had no special jollifications." Saturday nights they would sing and dance in the quarters and have prayer meetings. Then on some Sundays they could hitch up to a mule, to a big wagon, and all go to the white folks' church. And again there would be camp meetings held, and the slaves from all the surrounding plantations would attend, going to some in these large wagons, sometimes having 4 mules to a wagon. They would have a jolly time along the way, singing and calling to one another and making friends. Uncle Charlie said he drove many a load of cotton in the large mule wagons from Newton Station to Enterprise, Mississippi. When asked if that wasn't a chance to run away, he replied, "Get away? Why, madam, those nigger dogs would track you and all you got was a beating." Uncle Charlie seemed to look off into the distance and said, "You know, ma'am, I never saw a slave rebuked until I came to Mississippi, and I just couldn't understand it at first." But he grinned and said, "Lordy, madam, some of those niggers were ornery too, and a nigger driver was a driver sure enough." When the master's son, John Harris, went to war, Charlie went with his bodyguard. And when asked what his duties were, he replied, "I looked after Master John, tended the horses and the tents. I recalls well, madam, the siege of Vicksburg." The writer then asked him if he wasn't afraid of the shot and the shell all around him. "No, madam," he replied. "I kept way in the back where the camp was, for I didn't like to feel the earth trembling neath my feet. But you see, madam, I loved young Master John. And he loved me, and I just had to watch over that boy, and he came through all right." Uncle Charlie said when they were told the Yankees were coming through from their headquarters in Meridian, Mississippi, and warned of their raids, they all made to the swamps and stayed until they had passed on, but that the Yankees did not disturb the Jason Harris plantation. After the surrender, Charlie came to Mobile and worked at the Yankee camp, living in the quarters located in Hollius Garden. He drove their wagons and was paid $14 a month and his keep. After his discharge, he worked on steamboats and followed different lines of work, being employed for several years at Mr. M.L. Davis's sawmill, and is at present living on the Davis place at Oak Grove, Alabama, an old Southern home with quarters originally built for the employees of the mill and still known as the quarters. And like other antebellum homes, they have their private burying ground on that place. Uncle Charlie was married 4 times, but now a widower. He had 4 children, 2 boys who are dead, 2 girls, one Carrie Johnson, a widow, living in Cushla, Alabama, and the other Ella Aarons, a gross widow, living in Mobile, Alabama. Uncle Charlie says he saw Jeff Davis as an old man after the war at Mississippi City, Mississippi, and then his face lit up, and he said, "Wait a minute, madam, I saw another president. Let me think. Yes, ma'am, I saw President Grant. He came through Mobile from New Orleans, and my, there was a big parade that day." When asked about Abraham Lincoln, Uncle Charlie thought a while and answered, "According to what was issued out in the Bible, There was a time for slavery. People had to be punished for their sin, and then there was a time for it not to be. And the Lord had opened a good view to Mr. Lincoln, and he promoted a good idea. When he was asked about Booker T. Washington, he replied, "It was traversed out of to him until the white folks took part with him and helped him carry on." Uncle Charlie thinks the present-day folks are bad and wicked and don't realize anything like the old folks. Charlie is a Baptist, became one when he sought the Lord, and thinks all people should be religious. Bibliography, personal contact with Uncle Charlie Aarons, Oak Grove, Alabama. So that's the first slave narrative that I am starting this series off with. I'm interested in your comments. Yes, it's very interesting. Let's listen to a few of them before we launch into some analysis. So today we read about Charlie Aarons in Volume 1 of the Federal Writers Project, Slave Narratives, Alabama, and we started with Charles Aarons, a former slave, and his interview. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit subscribe and join my channel so that you can hear all of these slave narratives as I put them up.